I'm going to make a pork pie completely from scratch. This is a recipe I've never made before. I have no idea how it's going to go, but if you're seeing this, I think we can assume that it either went well or hilariously badly. I'm using Scott Ree's recipe for pork pie. He's the Scott Ree Project on YouTube. Go check out his channel. I'll put a link in the description below. What we're doing is called a hot water crust. And the very first step would be to, get some water that is hot. We're also going to need butter and lard. You can use all butter, you can use all lard, but I see no reason not to bring another animal into this if we can. This recipe, since it is from a person in England, is in metric. Grams and liters and such. So you're just gonna have to deal with that. We're gonna need 150 grams each of butter and lard. Oh, that's 115 grams. So we're actually, got the paper on there too. I'm sure the paper weighs something. 114. It's 1 gram of paper. And I need whatever the difference between 150 and 114 is. There's our 150 grams of butter. We need exactly the same amount of lard. 153, that's close enough. We need 300 milliliters, which is something in the neighborhood of a cup and a third of water, but 300 mils. This is going onto the stove until it's hot, at medium, up until everything's melted. And the water is hot, but not necessarily boiling, because it's not called boiling water crust. It's called hot water crust. I need 750 grams of flour. Bread flour is what I was told to use, so that's what I'm using. We need 3 eggs, and we need them beaten, so I'm going to crack them into this little guy here. And we will add in the eggs. So now we just need to add the hot water and fat into the flour and eggs, and then stir it with a wooden spoon until it comes together into a dough. Once you get it to this sort of like shaggy kind of dough-like consistency, we can switch to our hand, and it's warm, but it's not like too hot to touch. And we can just sort of knead it in the bowl here a little bit. It definitely does have like a very sort of smooth, springy kind of texture. Wrap this in plastic, set it aside, let it cool down for about an hour. This is a pork pie, so we have to start with pork. And this is pork shoulder, around 1 kilo. It's still got the bone in it, and there's some fat that we need to trim off of here. So we don't care about most of this fat, but this is a really big strip on the edge here, so I'm gonna trim away most of this giant piece. Need to get this bone out of here, I guess. So let's do that. You're gonna regret having started this recipe somewhere around the middle of having to cut half of the pork shoulder into 5mm dice. But Scott Ree assures me that this is the one instance in which life is not too short for 5mm dice. So this is just bacon. It's slab bacon. You can see it's thick, and it's pork belly. The original recipe calls for pork belly. I didn't feel like going back to the Asian market, and I have an Armenian market right across the street from my place, and they happen to carry this Polish-made slab bacon. So that is what I am using instead. Bets, did you want the pork skin?
No.
So this we need to just cut up into chunks because we're going to grind it. This is back bacon, English style bacon or Irish style bacon. Actually what the label says is Jolly Posh British and Irish style back bacon. I'm cutting this into 5mm dice as well. We got our bacon and half the pork shoulder diced into 5mm cubes. We just need to grind up the rest of the stuff. I don't have a meat grinder, so I'm gonna use the next best thing, which is my Cuisinart. Scott Ree said he used the coarse plate for his meat grinder, so I am guessing we are going for a coarse grind on this. Looks like a coarse grind to me. We need some spices in this, obviously. 1 teaspoon of salt. That's like a teaspoon. So we need a teaspoon of pepper, fresh cracked black pepper, obviously. You wouldn't use the stuff that's like pre-ground, would you? You have more respect for yourself than that. He also suggests white pepper, like a teaspoon of black pepper, a teaspoon of white pepper. I don't have white pepper, so I just used a little more black pepper. 1 teaspoon of sage. Oh wait, no, 2 of thyme and 2 of sage. My mistake, I only did 1 of thyme and 1 of sage, so I need 2 of both. All right, so that's 2 of sage and 2 of thyme. 1 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. I don't have any cayenne pepper. I also don't have any fingernails. Can you peel that thing off the top? I'm using, what is this? Ancho. Close enough. He calls for a pinch of mace, so I guess that's like, what, maybe? That's our spice mix. This just needs to go in with the meat. So here we go. And then, you know, just use your hands to toss it around. Well, as you can see from the pictures, that didn't go exactly as planned. It was delicious. It's just sort of slumped on us, which I'm going to attempt to alleviate with this. This is a pork pie mold, and it's got like one of them false bottom sort of deals. I found this on Amazon. I want to say it was about $20. It's 4 inches by 4 inches. I'm guessing that there's probably 2 pies worth of dough here. So this is half of the dough less 1/4, which is this right here, which I'm trying to, or that I'm going to reserve for the lid. All right. Ideally, you want the dough to be something in the neighborhood of like 1 centimeter thick. If you don't know what a centimeter is, I guess you're gonna have to break out a ruler. I'm also putting a little bit of a lip around the top because that'll give us something to seal our top crust to. All right. That looks like a pretty good meat receptacle to me. This is what we got going on right now. You kind of want to pack the meat together so that there's no air pockets in there, because air is not delicious. Versus pork. Pork, now that's some good stuff. You can't survive on air alone, you know. You got to get some pork in there. So we are just going to use some water and moisten up the rim here. We are going to attempt to cap our pie like thusly. Go ahead and trim this excess dough. Let's see what we can do by putting something sort of decorative around here. In case it's not apparent to like literally everybody watching, I do not know what I'm doing most of the time. We need to make a little steam hole in the top. Now I'm really nervous about the next step because the next step is me ejecting it from the mold. And then I am going to use parchment paper. This is just some cotton baking twine. Theoretically, it should be oven safe. I guess we're gonna find out. I'm gonna put it onto a silicone mat, so we need to get this up onto that guy, and we still have the base of the mold under this as well, so we don't want to forget that. Boom! And so we're gonna brush the top with egg wash, which is literally just 1 beaten egg with a little splash of water in there. This will make the top nice and glossy. Once we get this into the oven and the crust starts to cook, it'll be able to stand up under its own weight, and then we'll be able to remove the paper and the twine. Then we'll definitely get egg wash brushed around the outside as well, because we want the whole thing to be nice and glossy. Well, these don't look too terribly bad. They definitely look better than the first batch that I made. I had a little extra dough left over, so I sort of snuck a little guy in. And this one actually looks pretty darn good. It could stand to be a little bit darker on the bottom, I suppose, but it's held together. This guy looks pretty good from this side, but if we turn it around, you can see we got one little blowout there, but then a pretty decent blowout over here. And then this guy looks pretty good if you hide it behind something. Obviously that didn't go exactly as expected, but I think I know what I did wrong, which is essentially I took the paper off too early. Let's give it another go around, and I feel like this time we might actually be successful. I kind of wanted to do something a little more challenging than just baking inside of a pie mold, which is why I haven't baked inside of the pie mold. And so, you know, I wanted to do these freestanding pies. So now if I ever need to crank out any pork pies in the future, very, very distant future, I will know that I can make as many freestanding pork pies as I need to. These look like pies, and that's pretty good because that's what I was going for. In England, when they make pork pies like this, they usually fill up the space in between the crust and the meat with jelly, which is basically just like a stock that's been thickened with gelatin. If you want to use pork stock, and I mean this is like pork, so why wouldn't you want to use pork stock? I have no idea where on earth you would buy pork stock, probably nowhere. So I made pork stock with just the trimmings from the pork shoulder that I use from this, so just like the bone and the skin. Look how gelatinous it is, just water and pork, and I think I threw like a garlic and an onion in there as well. You know, maybe someday we'll show you how to do that. In my mind, I was thinking maybe there's an easy way to do this, and so I was thinking maybe turkey baster, but turkey basters leak like more than they do baste. But this does have a nice pointy nozzle on it, so maybe I can just kind of use it as a funnel. Franken-funnel deployed. Let's give this a shot. I started off with a pint of jelly that's 2 cups, so that was like 1 cup total to fill up both pies, so I guess we'll call that half a cup on average. We're basically done for the evening. This isn't one of those things that you get to eat right away, unfortunately. We've already had to let them cool since we cooked them, and then we need to let them cool in the fridge overnight until the jelly sets. Well, it's the next day. You can tell I'm wearing a different shirt. The jelly's all set in the pie. I weighed this before we started rolling. It was about 750 grams. That's in the neighborhood of 1.5 pounds. It's like bigger than my fist, you can see. It's fairly hefty. One of these could easily feed like 2 me's or like 3 to 4 regular humans if you have like some potatoes or something to go along with it. I guess there's nothing really left to do but to cut her open and get ourselves a peek at the inside. Yeah. I was thinking a serrated knife, but then like this knife is just sharper. Feels like I'm making the right call. All right, moment of truth. Well, I didn't fill it all the way to the top with jelly, it looks like, but that is not bad. That's basically what we wanted to see. I think we should probably give this a try. Given that this is a British-style pork pie, Coleman's mustard would most definitely be the condiment of choice. This stuff is really strong. If you've never tried it and you like mustard, I suggest you give it a shot. It's pretty tasty stuff. Do I have any stuff on my mustache? That's really good, even though this is like the 3rd batch of pies and like fifth pie I think I've eaten in the last few weeks. The jelly thing might be a little bit weird for, you know, most Americans to get their head around, and you could totally leave it out if you don't want it in there. You don't have to put it in there, but I don't know. I do think it adds something, and it is nice to like fill up the space in between the crust and the meat with something. And if it's going to be something, it might as well be pork, right? If I was going to do it differently next time, I think the couple of things that I might do would be to bake it in the actual mold itself. Just, you know, give up. Give up and let the mold do its work. And then secondly, I'd probably do the jelly application in 2 stages, because I think the meat shrunk even more when it got into the fridge, and that's why we didn't have jelly all the way up to the top of the crust. Other than that, like, this is a really delicious recipe, and even though it does take a little bit of time, it's not really that hard. I really like pork pie, so I'm glad I know how to make them now, even though I'm probably not going to do that in the near future, because I am completely pork pied out. Well, thank you very much for tuning in this week, and, you know, I'll see you again soon when I feel like I have something I want to show you. Thanks. See you later.